everybody. Welcome to ABA Inside Track, the podcast that's like reading in your car, but safer. I'm your host, Robert Perry Cruz, and with me as always are my fabulous co-hosts.
Hey, Rob, it's Diana.
And it's Jackie. Hi.
And hi. And on the line, we have a very special guest. We were talking about this before the show. We can call you Dr. Mary-Katherine Carey now, or Dr. Carey. Is that okay?
I think I'm hesitant. I don't have that diploma on my wall yet, so
the mail order diploma's coming soon, though, right?
Yes, I'm hesitant to say doctor, but
she's a doctor, guys.
Almost.
I'm
doctor.
Close.
Gentlemen,
close.
She's a doctor.
Yeah, not that kind of doctor.
Congratulations, Mary-Kate.
Thank you.
Yes, so Mary-Kate is here on ABA Inside Track to talk about the best in behavior analysis and behavior analytic research with a topic that is near and dear to her heart. Mary-Kate, what are we going to be talking about today on the show?
So today we're going to be talking about data collection.
Woo-hoo!
So exciting.
Get excited.
I love data collection. It's part of my everyday life.
So exciting, but it is really important because it's one of the cornerstones of behavior analyst decision making, and good BCBAs will be making all of their decisions based on the data that are collected. So it's really important that we make sure that we are collecting good data and enough data, and that our data is really speaking to the behavior that it's measuring. I'm excited. I love data.
I love data too. And one thing that I learned from Diana is that data are plural.
That's true.
That's right.
So I always said data is, and she's like, Jackie, data are.
The data are.
Just like I
The
away.
datum is.
Right. I away.
Right, that's a tricky
Were.
one. That is a tricky one because IOA
Implies multiple.
implies data. It's inter-observer agreement data. You just don't say the data part. So you're supposed to say IOA
Were.
collected.
Isn't that amazing?
That one is a sneaker.
I know. I just got that one like last month.
That's
Thanks,
mean.
Diana. I know.
That's a mean one. I heard that they might be.
You're
I
welcome.
heard that the popular sentiment on the data datum is turning, and we're supposed to start thinking about data if it's like a group of data. So like the data I use in my research studies are, but if you're talking about data as like big data, you can say data is.
No, you cannot.
Well, I just heard that might be a thing.
Well, you're wrong.
I mean, society is going to decide that for
No.
us. No? Okay, sorry.
I'm going to live in my own verbal community. Thank you very much.
Depends on your audience, who you talk to about that. I think Grammar Girl might have told me that one.
Well, you should stop listening to her.
She wrote 7 books about grammar.
Wow. She definitely has a niche.
Rob has a crush on
Oh,
Grammar
no.
Girl.
Ew. Yuck.
You 100% do. It's
I mean,
fine.
no, sorry, Grammar Girl. I don't mean to insult you, Grammar Girl. I think you're married, and I don't have a crush on you. You're fine. You're cool.
Diana is the Grammar Girl OG. So she was Grammar Girl before Grammar Girl existed. So I would go with Diana.
Thanks, Mary-Kate.
You're welcome.
So, Mary
Always
Kate,
got your back.
for listeners who don't know you, please tell us more about you and your interest in data and your interest in yourself.
Okay, so my clinical job for the last, up until last month has been to be a behavior analyst working with really young kids diagnosed with autism in their homes.
Mhm.
So I've been supervising RBTs that have gone into the home and provided 25 to 30 hours of EIBI, our early intensive behavioral intervention, to these little guys. Data collection in that setting is interesting because you're not at a table the entire time like you might be in a center-based type of setting or a school type of setting where your materials are neatly stacked and you have clickers available. When you're in the home, you're in many different rooms, you're on the floor, you're moving and grooving with these little guys. So getting accurate data is challenging in a different way than it might be in other settings. And the other thing is you're with these little guys, for up to 6 hours a day. So you're programming in opportunity after opportunity. And for example, with man training, you may be programming for 100 mans a day.
Right.
Which is a lot. It's a lot of mans.
It's a lot
It's
of
raining
lessons. It's
Yes.
raining mans. Hallelujah.
That was so good.
Thanks.
Was good. We have
So
to
the
pause and laugh
question-
there.
Yeah.
But you're right. That's exactly what it's like. 100 mans.
It's just 100. It's just man after man.
Yeah.
Amongst other skills that you're teaching all at once. And so I was kind of wondering to myself a few years ago, I really wonder if we need to collect data on every single one of these opportunities.
Right.
That's a lot.
How many years ago was that, Mary-Kate?
It was
People love this too. 5 years ago?
5. And I know we're not to my article yet, but do you want to know the truth about
Always.
how these were like things that I'd been thinking about. My lab had talked a lot about this. This was not my original master's thesis. I did a thesis before this that, shall we say, crashed and burned.
Yeah, I had one of
We
those
shall
too.
say that.
Yeah.
So come March, when I was supposed to be graduating in August, I needed a thesis.
Mm-hmm.
And so my wonderful advisor, Dr. Bourret, we had kind of talked about this question in our lab about, well, how much data do you really need to take during discrete trial training to determine if a skill is mastered? He said, why don't we look into that now, since you need a thesis yesterday?
Not stressful at all.
No, definitely not. So that was kind of how the project came about, if you will.
Excellent.
I like that. It's like a failed thesis attempt. That's
Yeah,
why you
no, it
started
was.
this
It was. It also happened in my dissertation where I did one dissertation and it didn't pan out. And so I did a second dissertation. So that's kind of my,
Just a quick little second one there.
yeah, just like a real fast, like a year or two, dissertation.
No big.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine. I just like to do multiple projects
That's right.
within each degree.
So we've got two main articles that we'll be discussing today, or on the show, that you'd recommended. The first one was Evaluating Progress in Behavioral Programs for Children with Autism Spectrum Disorders via Continuous and Discontinuous Measurement by Cummings and Carr from the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis, 2009. And then we have your article, Carey and Bourret's Effects of Data Sampling on Graphical Depictions of Learning from 2014, also in the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis. So why don't we get into the discussion immediately, anon, as they might say.
Do they say that?
Someone might. I just
Shakespeare
did.
might.
Shakespeare.
Okay.
Like Chaucer or Shakespeare.
God.
Cool.
So why don't we start with the Cummings and Carr? Because I don't... When you wrote your article, Mary-Kate, did you think of it as sort of a sequel to the Cummings and Carr, or as you were sort of asking a similar but different question?
No, I think I thought of it as a sequel, and it wasn't. I recommended Cummings and Carr because I really like this article, but it wasn't just the Cummings and Carr piece. The story starts with, or I picked the story up at Cummings and Carr, and then Najowski et al. Had a nice little study, and then Lerman et al. Had a nice little study, and those 3 studies together kind of paved the way for our study that we did.
I like that. I like the mashup.
Yeah.
Of all
So
the
we're gonna review in detail this grandfather study all the way back in 2009.
The olden days.
And then we'll hop, skip, and jump down to your study 2014. And you can fill us in along the way for
Perfect.
Najowski and Lerman. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Tell me the story, the bedtime story. Let's put all our listeners to sleep.
I love that.
Take a deep breath.
Thank you. You
I remembered.
Oh, Rob really is so sweet
They
sometimes.
just high-fived, y'all.
We high-fived. He's so sweet. If you haven't been listening to this podcast, and this is your first one, we're a behavior analytic podcast. We haven't done that yet.
Didn't I say that?
I don't think so.
I said, yeah, I did. I said
No.
behavior analysis, behavior analytic research.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure I did.
All right. Well, anyway, that's what we do. But I really love
Reading
Rob's
Rainbow.
sensitive soul.
Rob's sensitive soul and the Reading Rainbow guy. LeVar Burton does a storytelling thing now on a podcast, and he says, "Now, everyone ready? Take a deep breath. Let's begin." And I love it.
And I want to hear the story of discontinuous data collection, the ups and downs, the twists and turns.
It's funny. Well,
Here we go.
Yeah, here we go.
And when
So
we get back to the beginning, the journey will be really what was worth it.
it will be
This one is about the journey.
100% worth it.
It's a lot of review of old people's data.
Yeah. So it's so interesting, though, because we all have done discrete trial before,
Oh, yeah.
right? So if you're a behavior analyst or working in the field of behavior analysis, I'm pretty sure you've done discrete trial or some caveat of discrete trial, right? And we all know that a common problem with discrete trial or a restricted operant performance is that sometimes it takes a long time. And there's a lot of pieces that happen when you're running discrete trial. So you have to give an instruction, you have to have a student response, you may have to prompt that response, you may have to error correct, you may have to reinforce, you have to take data. There's a lot of junky junk that happens, right? So if you're starting out
It's
new,
like a big, long TA.
it's huge, yeah. And we all know that it takes some practice and some skill.
Yeah.
And so some people thought, do we need to do all of this? Do
And not
we?
just some people.
A lot
think
of people.
Pretty much anyone who sits down and does discrete trial.
That's true. Anyone
After
that
you
questions.
do it for a while, you're like, is this necessary?
Right.
That I take all of these data
Yeah. It's
on
true.
every single trial?
Right.
And I think it actually is a good question.
It's a great
right?
question.
So does the performance on the first trial predict the performance on the remaining trials? Is basically the question I think that most people come away
Right.
with.
Or can we take some semblance of data, but not maybe all of the data?
Right.
Right?
Right.
So this is basically what our question is today. We're going to look at continuous measurement, which means taking data on every trial all the
Which
time.
is what I have always done.
Me too. All the data.
All the data. All the time.
New shirt. Or if we can...
That's a good one, actually. I'm
I
writing
know.
that down.
Write it down. Swag. Or can we use discontinuous measurement? So not take all the data all the time, but maybe just take some of the data. So in this case, in the research that we're going to talk about today, take data on the first trial only of a session and then see how it goes. But still run the rest of the session, right? We're like, sometimes when I first read these, I'm like, you're just running one trial in a session?
Come on,
no.
people.
Everybody's running all of the trials, but you're only taking data on that one session.
Right.
And typically, it's usually just, did they get it right or wrong?
First probe.
Yeah.
Probe trial data. Yeah.
Right.
And Cummings and Carr point out that with continuous reinforcement, you get a complete picture of all the data. So if you ever want to go back and look at every single trial, you can look at patterns in the data. You can see, is just the first first trial prompted and then the rest of it is not prompted, which is good to know.
Right.
Right. Or do you see independent responding in the beginning and then more prompting as it goes on, which is indicative of a different type of problem.
Right.
Or is it variable throughout? You don't get any of that information with just a first trial probe data.
But with first trial, it actually is less time. It takes less time.
Right. So, I mean, you're cutting out that time that it takes to record the data. Now, if you're a skilled clinician or BT, then it shouldn't take that long.
Right.
To record the data, right?
That was a big question that we will get into later with our study, but that we were really interested in because in this Cummings and Carr article, at the very end, like the last, for all of our lovely listeners that have their articles out and ready and listening.
By the fire.
Reading. Yes. It says in here that continuous measurement appears to increase session duration. But there are no data from this study supporting that claim.
True.
And so, I mean, logically that made sense to me as a behavior analyst that had taken many a data on discrete, a datum, if you will, many a datum, if you will, on a discrete trial session. I was like, oh my gosh, that takes so much more time. But really, we didn't have those data showing whether that was true or not. So
it should also be noticed, too, in the Cummings and Carr article that the therapist had 10 years of experience on her belt as well. So, I mean, she wasn't really inexperienced.
Right. So, and to be fair, in our time savings analysis, our therapists were also pretty skilled as well. So, there's that.
It's a point in the column of discontinuous measurement, right? It should take less time. It should be a little less effortful. It should probably decrease session duration. It should decrease intertrial interval.
Yes.
And it should also increase the immediacy of the reinforcer.
And people might like it better. Right?
It's easier.
It's just easier. If you're only required to take data one time and then you can just go on with your busy day.
But then you don't find out the rest of the data.
I know. I'm just saying.
I'm a purist, I think.
I know you are.
Yeah, but what if we need to know that? I think I would just end up taking all the data on the side.
Yeah, you'd have like a little thing of like
just in case you need to know, here are the rest.
But then I think the question comes out is if you've got people who aren't 10 years of training, or you got to train up your new RBTs and you got, a day to do it, what if no one's going to look at that data?
Mm-hmm.
You should. But what if, maybe I save some time and it's a little bit easier. And I'll be honest, I'm only going to be able to look at this data real quick. So the first probe's going to be all I need. Because there are certainly programs that might not want to look at everyone. They might not let their RBTs do like a prompt hierarchy switch based on that data.
Right.
They might say, just run it twice at this level, then run it twice at this level, then I'll look at it. Because that's when I come out to look at the sessions or do my supervision. They could have set it up that way.
Yeah, and Cummings and Carr does suggest that the discontinuous measurement program usually works best with language acquisition programs. So those based on the verbal behavior approach.
That's how Carbone,
that's how it does it. Yeah,
methodology. They do like the initial
so
probes.
they say this is how they typically would run those types of procedures. So, but it would be interesting to know, could we do that for everything, right?
I don't know. Could we, guys?
Let's find out.
There's no way to know. We'll never know.
Oh, well, that's it for the episode.
But I want Diana to talk to us a little bit about the previous research, though, because there's two...
Do we go in the Wayback Machine?
Wayback Machine. I want you to jump in the Wayback Machine, Diana. Because there's two articles that they cite in the Cummings and Carr article as previous research that seems silly to us, but it's so like, of course
you got to start somewhere, right? So, the question had to initiate... Somewhere. And it initiated, presumably,
in the 60s. I love
with
that.
Bijou and colleagues in 1969. Because once you start taking data, you start wondering, is this really necessary?
My hands
all the way back to 1969, they had this question. And what they did was pretty simple. They compared data points that were collected continuously and then data points that were collected every other day. Or really what they did was show teachers just either the daily data or the data that were collected on every other day. So they collected data every day, which is important to note, but they showed them half of the data. And they found that the teachers interpreted the data similarly across both of those conditions. So with that regard, you might say, well, maybe it doesn't really matter. Maybe we could take less data and still have the overall similar effect. And then a follow-up, they call it a follow-up, but it was 20 years later.
I love that. 20 years later, they're like, ooh, look at this gem.
Bringing it back around. Munger and colleagues in 1989 did a comparison between looking at data that were collected every day, data that were every other day, 3 days a week, 2 days a week, 1 day a week. All permutations, basically. And what they found, so they showed these same data to teachers and said, how would you interpret these data, or what would you do next based on these data? And what they found is that if the data were ascending, that the teachers all interpreted them the same way, regardless of how much data were present. But if it were any other pattern, so if the data were on a descending trend or stable trend or variable trend, then the interpretations were different based on how much data was being shown.
Which is basically always, right? Like, it's never that all your data is like, you're doing great.
Pretty much. Yeah. Pretty much. So that was kind of cool. But the take-home point from those is that those data were looking at extended time frame.
Right.
And what we really want to know is how much data do we need to collect within a particular session. And the other really important point there, what we want to know is not just how would we interpret data if we only looked at half of the data that were collected, but how would we make active treatment decisions if we were to use a discontinuous measurement?
Right.
And that was the question that Cummings and Carr really wanted to ask.
Right, which I like.
So that's the Wayback Machine. Now we're going to fast forward back to 2009, the 21st century. All right, there were 6 participants in this study. Aaron, Jeff, Patrick, Peter, Mary, and Allison. No Paul.
Bummer.
I know.
Wait, why?
Because there's Peter and Mary.
Oh.
Paul's not here.
No.
He's off puffing with the magic
puff.
dragon. They were all between the ages of 4 and 8, and they all had a diagnosis of autism or a related disability. This was a skill acquisition study. So they looked at teaching them a variety of skills. They were either being taught in the home setting or in the center setting. And for each of them, they identified at least 2 different acquisition programs to teach multiple sets from, Jackie, do you have the list in front of you?
Yeah, I have non-vocal imitation, echoics, receptive instruction, receptive discrimination, receptive by feature, function, and class, tax, requests, interverbals, social questions, interverbals, occupation, and drawing. And it looks like only one of the 6 participants only had 2 acquisition. The rest of them had more than 2. Aaron had 2, but everyone else had more than 2.
So there was quite a variety, but not everyone was exposed to all of those different programs.
Right.
That was just the whole list of the different curricular options that were available. And each of them had, like Jackie said, at least 2 programs in acquisition, and then some of those programs were also maintenance programs as well, and they interspersed the acquisition and the maintenance together.
Each only had 1 maintenance program.
Gotcha. All right. So you can sort of imagine what they did. They took one of these programs and they assigned one set of stimuli to the continuous measurement condition and one set of stimuli to the discontinuous measurement condition. And for most participants, they tested multiple sets in this format. And they also may have learned multiple skills as well. So this was a long project.
Super long.
It should not surprise anyone that this was a doctoral dissertation.
No.
Because they taught these 6 students
a bazillion skills.
Yes.
Basically. It's not
I think it was like 100 training sets.
Oh, yeah.
Across the 6 participants.
Sets.
So it's an insane amount of teaching that happened.
Yeah, this must have taken a really long time.
It's raining training sets. Hallelujah.
There's a whole
here.
table. It's got them all laid out.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Really nice and organized.
Yeah, it's a ton.
That table probably took 1,000 years to make, too.
Okay, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Dr. Cummings was not in the situation where
Yeah.
she had 3 months to do this project. I'm going to say she had a little bit longer.
If
to get
she did
done.
this in 3 months, then she can use whatever data collection system she likes.
That's
right?
true. That's true, because her kids learned.
Exactly.
And yes, her data were orderly.
Maybe it was like a hobby, you know, she did
Yeah.
for years and years, and then decide, you know what, I might as well just use this.
What should I do with all these data?
She's like sitting in a pile of graphs. Huh.
They were in my scrapbook, but guess I'll use them.
Guess I'll get a PhD. They taught these programs in 20 trial blocks, in which half of those trials were acquisition and half were maintenance.
One thing when I read that, they also could have just shortened it. If they're saying that one of the disadvantages of using continuous measurement is that it's long, well, why don't you just run acquisition?
Yeah, I didn't fully understand
People
why.
do this. No, people do this a lot. It's supposed to, one thing I've read, I can't place the article, but I've read that if you intersperse maintenance with acquisition, it's supposed to increase the probability of correct responding because of the increased probability of reinforcement.
I think it depends on
What you're doing.
You know, yeah. So like a lot of the direct instruction work back in the back in like the 60s and early 80s, all of that is mostly maintenance, only a little acquisition.
Right.
And then I know there were a couple studies a few years ago looking at what's better, mass trial or interspersed trial or interspersed maintenance.
Idiosyncratic.
Yeah, it was one of those like, I don't know, it depends on the kid.
So I did some of that research.
Yeah.
That was
Tell
the
me the
answer.
I
freaking
did too.
answer.
Yeah,
we
was
did it
Diana.
together.
I know, none of it panned out to be publishable because it was
Too
all just
bad.
idiosyncratic, yeah.
But I feel like that was very useful because I know I've had people tell me, no, you have to do maintenance. It's very important. You have to do maintenance. And I said, why? I don't think you have to do anything. I think you can just pick whichever one you want. And it's, you know, it's a gamble which one the kid likes.
Right.
You
It's
could
true.
make up a reason you think they might like this one versus that one, but you don't know unless you actually compare the three. And no one in their right mind is going to do that for a student unless there's some sort of quick protocol, like a preference assessment for your favorite kind of trials. Anyway, we should do that. We should do that episode sometime, I guess.
Well, we've got research
We
looking
do.
at the best like prompt type and prompt fading. I mean, I'm thinking of like Fever and Bourret.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2014.
I was thinking that too.
Mhm.
Oh my God, we're twinsies in our thoughts.
What? So that's like an antecedent manipulation.
Yeah.
And I don't know why you couldn't apply the same or extend the same methodology to that question.
Master's thesis.
Yeah, I think you totally could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be fun.
Great. New study. Do you guys have a list of studies you come up with during this podcast?
No.
No, we should really have done
If
that.
any
as we
listeners
went.
would like to compile those together and send them to us, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what I'll do for fun. I'll just go back and re-listen
listen
to
to
all
everything.
of our
Oh.
episodes.
I feel like you guys have come up with some great study
we
ideas.
have,
You
and I was
should-
like, I'm gonna write that down, and then I never did.
yeah.
No, we never do.
Well, get your big whiteboard out
I
that you
know.
have just sitting there. I'm
In the
sure,
studio.
right? Yeah.
Someone write this down. So the dependent measure for this study was the percent of correct responding on acquisition trials. And the mastery criterion was 2 consecutive sessions at 100%. Pop quiz, why do you think it was 100%?
I
Is
know.
that for everyone, or are you just asking Mary Kate?
Or
No,
yeah.
not just Mary.
Which seems
Yeah.
mean, because you
Mary
often
Kate,
on our show,
pop
we're asking her
quiz.
hard questions.
I know the answer.
I figured you would.
Yeah, because I read the article.
I mean, it's because you can't compare them without the 100%, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
I also read the article.
Because if you're only looking at one trial for discontinuous, it has to be 100%.
It has to be, yes.
Right.
That was the issue that a couple of those, I know, again, we'll get into it later,
No,
but
that's fine.
a
We
couple
can
of
get into
those
it now.
other articles, like Najowski et al. And Lerman et al., their criteria didn't map on to what was possible within the trials that behavior was measured across.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, when they were measuring 3 trial data or looking at mastery for 3 trial data, it was 80% independent. Well, if you miss
Right.
one within 3 trials, you're at 67%. So you're
It's not
never going to
helpful.
meet that.
Yeah.
It has to functionally be 100%. So anyway, that's why we ended up using the 100% criterion for our study as well.
Good catch.
Ugh, I hate when math screws up your
I know.
ability to like teach a kid
things.
a skill. It's like, sorry, I only do 1, and they got 1 wrong out of the
Yeah.
100 you ran, so 0.
Well, if you don't know it, you don't know it, Rob.
But if you knew 100 and you only took data on 1, I mean, there's a good shot that they knew like 87
Yeah.
or 92.
That's true.
So the dependent variable here was number of sessions to mastery for each of the acquisition sets, and also the percent of correct responding in a follow-up probe. So following training, 3 weeks later,
Mm-hmm.
they did nothing in between. I mean, presumably they did other things, but nothing related to this acquisition
Come to
set.
school and
Then
sit
they represented
alone.
it without prompts or reinforcement to see what would happen. Basically the definition of a probe. Now that I'm saying that all that out loud, you probably already figured that out. So that was the other dependent variable. And then I didn't talk too much about the training, but one important thing I think to note is that they use least to most prompting.
Right.
That's unusual.
Definitely. Within discrete trial training,
Right.
it's almost always most to least.
So that was a choice that they made, but it's good for everyone to kind of know that that's how they did the training. Now, everyone learned. There was no issue there, and that wasn't what they were looking at, was what was the most effective prompting method. So in the end, they learned, and they all learned well.
The students, too, that they selected, the 6 participants, did have a lot of language and a lot of skills already, too,
According to the BLAF.
according to the BLAF. So that's good to note as well. So the least to most may have been effective for them because they learned quickly, is what
Totally.
they noted in
Yeah.
the discussion. You know, uh-oh.
And they were learning some tricky skills. Some of them were learning
yeah.
tricky skills like interverbal questions. And
Right, so that's interesting to note. But so it might be different if you had learners that didn't have quite the extensive repertoire.
Yeah.
Extensive repertoire.
All right. So they taught them a bazillion skills, and then, which amounted to 100 training sets. Whew, boy, that's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
So much.
They also took the cumulative number of minutes that it took for
I know,
each
I
of
love
the
that.
sessions. Yeah. So
Yeah.
and then they pitted them against each other, continuous or discontinuous. Who won?
That's what I'm ready to talk about that now.
Let's do it.
Are you?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first question was, who reached mastery quicker? Continuous or discontinuous?
Through an alternating treatment design.
Adapted alternating treatment design. And the answer, out of 100 sets, so you can basically just make it a percentage if you want to.
Wait, don't you love it? Sounds like Family Feud. We asked 100 sets.
show me continuous.
Continuous, for mastery quicker, continuous is going to be in your number 3 spot, Rob.
Oh.
Only 16% of sets were
Right.
learned quicker in the continuous data collection method.
Show me discontinuous.
Ding, ding, ding! 49% of training sets were learned quickest in the discontinuous method.
Show me neither.
Last choice, no difference. Show me no difference. 35%, no difference. Okay?
Sure.
So remember, you're just looking at that first probe point. So based on the first probe, where you had to get 100% in one trial, 49% of those sets, that was met quicker in the discontinuous method. All right, the second question is, which skills were maintained better? Continuous versus discontinuous.
And it was
Continuous.
Show me continuous.
no. Bing, 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 33.
Bing, bing. It's in the number 2 spot at 33%.
Yes.
Show me no difference.
Ding, ding.
Am I trying to get
Ding,
number
ding,
one,
ding,
or am I just
ding.
trying to say them all?
I don't care. We're going to say them all. So,
Yes.
in the number 1 spot, no difference, 66%.
Show me discontinuous.
Ding. 1%. We're
That's
better
not-
maintained.
That's not a lot of percent right there. That's a lot. It's little.
It's like the lowest percent above 0.
That's true.
It is.
Yeah. Okay, so most times there was no difference. But when there was a difference, responding maintained better following meeting the mastery criterion using the continuous measurement system. All right?
Yeah.
So, and then remember how there were 49 sets that were mastered more quickly with this continuous? Of those, 22 were maintained more poorly than their continuous counterparts. That's what we
Womp
know.
womp.
Right? Now, for all participants, they learned the skills in fewer trials using the discontinuous measurement. But again, remember that the mastery criterion was, in that case, just the first trial, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
So when we consider all that time saved, they did us a little calculation there, and each participant saved between 33 and 100 minutes of time.
Wow.
So that is quite a lot of time. But then when you balance that against how well were the skills maintained in the long run,
Which is your ultimate goal?
exactly, which is
Yes.
your ultimate goal, is kind of sort of a wash,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
And
Me too.
I totally agree. And that's kind of to, again, cut to what we found very similar things. We're like, yes, you do save time with discontinuous, but if you're doing the risk-benefit analysis,
Which you should,
Like-
Mary-Kate, now according to our guidelines.
you
Every
should.
time.
You absolutely should. Totally agree. But saving 33 minutes, even saving an hour to really ensuring that a student has learned a skill, I'd rather spend the extra hour.
Yeah.
And teach the skill to true mastery.
Girl, I'm with you.
True mastery.
True. But then I feel like then the next question that begs is, well, maybe 1 trial is too little,
Right.
but maybe 3 trials, right?
Yeah.
Or 5 trials.
Or 5.
Hint, hint, hint.
Or session sampling.
Which should segue us pretty nicely into talking about Carey and Bourret.
But before we go into Carey and Bourret, I want us to take a nice little break. We'll be right back.
Hey, ABA Inside Trackers. It's me, Jackie.
And it's me, Diana. Jackie, I'm really excited to be joining you in this commercial because I've also started my career path at Regis.
Yay! Yes, that's right, folks. If you want to start an exciting career in applied behavior analysis, you should check out the Master's and Certificate program in Applied Behavior Analysis at Regis College. You can learn from both Diana and me. Here are some interesting facts about our program.
90% of our 2016 graduates passed the BCBA exam during their first time taking the exam. We think this is a really great testament to the program.
We started an on-campus autism center in fall 2017. The center provides behavior analytic services to children diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder right at Regis College. The center will offer employment opportunities for some of our graduate students. Students working at the center will receive partial tuition remission.
We also offer opportunities for paid clinical placements and graduate assistantships starting in the student's first year. So all of our grad students are currently working in the field either part-time or full-time.
Yes, we help students identify their practicum placements because we think it's imperative students receive excellent training and experience in the application of behavior analysis. Therefore, we screen placements to ensure students receive high-quality practicum placements.
We are approved by the BACB to provide intensive practicum. Students complete at least 750 hours, but most complete much more over the course of 3 semesters. Across that time, students complete a professional portfolio that includes completing a variety of application exercises, such as conducting assessments, developing behavior plans, training curriculum, and more. This portfolio functions as a way to ensure students are learning the essentials of being an effective behavior analyst and is a great way to showcase your work at job interviews upon graduation. I love it.
Students enroll in 2 courses per semester and graduate in a little under 2 years. Our courses are offered in traditional classroom and hybrid formats, which enables a student to focus on one course at a time while still completing the program quickly.
All of the faculty are PhD-level BCBAs with strong applied and research backgrounds in ABA, and all have published papers in respected peer-reviewed journals.
We ensure small class sizes so that all students receive personalized attention from their professors, and advisors are easily accessible to meet with students.
There is also an invited lecture series at Regis, which involves inviting outside experts in ABA to speak on specialized topics relating to practicing ABA, and these are really great opportunities for students to learn from a variety of experts in the field in addition to their professors.
And last summer, we completed an international service trip to Iceland, which we plan to do every other year.
Although we train students to work effectively with individuals diagnosed with autism, we also have opportunities for students to work with individuals with a variety of diagnoses and typically developing individuals as well. In addition, the coursework covers the broad applications of ABA with respect to solving socially important problems.
There are opportunities for students to be involved in faculty research as well.
We have a great location. We're just 12 miles from the center of Boston.
So check us out at www.regiscollege.edu.
See you there.
Keep responding.
And we are back. And you know what? I want to do one more thing before we get into that next article, and that is review our first of 2 secret code words. Yes, that's right. If this is your first time or you haven't listened in a while to ABA Inside Track, we are ACE approved. So by listening to this podcast, you can earn yourself one nice Type 2 CE. All you need to do is go to our website, abainsidetrack.com/get -CEUs, or click the link in the show notes and you can order CEs from us. But you're going to need a couple bits of information as well as these 2 secret codes. Here's the first one. It is molehill, MOLEHILL, all one word, molehill. Like you don't want to make a mountain out of one. Or if you have a molehill in your yard, it's ruined your property value.
I was just going to say,
goddamn
is that why
moles.
You chose that word?
Something is digging holes in my garden. I don't know what it is.
I hate that.
Molehill. Anyway, so Mary-Kate, thanks for coming on our show and listening to all our secret code words and interstitial songs. Why don't you talk about your totally awesome data review article, which seemed like you must have had so many stacks of paper in front of you when you were reviewing all these things.
I did. I had a lot of paper and generated, I think when I was like in the depths of data collection in this study, I counted and I had made like 322 Excel graphs.
Oh my God.
Because
who can make more?
I know, it was a lot. So as I was looking back at this, I was like, why did I have so many graphs? Why did we do that? But it was because for every data set that we had, we generated graphs for every type of sampling that was performed.
Wow.
That's
and
a
it
lot.
and then I think I messed up on a few, and so I redid them. So yeah, it was a lot of excelling.
Wait, Mary-Kate, do you think you're really good at making graphs?
Now I do,
Yeah.
but I think it was because of this.
Yeah.
But I think I'm also like really, really particular now, which future graduate students may find annoying.
No, they
But
won't.
it was-
They'll like it in the end.
It was thanks to this. But I feel like I, am an old soul and like 78 years old, because who really uses Excel anymore to graph?
So true. So true.
Wait, what do people use to graph?
They're
Sigma
using
plot.
Prism. They're
Prism.
using like super sexy stuff, and I'm still Microsoft Office, so I'm behind.
Yeah, but I guess if
I
you're
love
in like,
Excel.
if you're in like a research environment, but I mean, if you're just making graphs, you probably use an Excel or Google
You're
Sheets.
probably using Excel.
Making
yeah.
the graphs.
Kind of hoity-toity people are using
Excel.
fancy.
Making the graphs. I love Excel, man. I
mean,
I love
I
going
still use
into
it.
someone else's messed up graph and being like, let me just right click here and
She actually does. One of my graduate students and I were hanging out, and Diana came in, and I was like, Diana, look at this. And then she was already on my computer. It's like she jumped on my desk, and she's like, fixed it. It was
you're like,
so
you don't have to
fast.
fix that now. It's like, oh no, I do. You invited me in here and I am fixing your graph.
And she did.
She's really quick.
Yeah, she is.
You
love
can't
it.
leave her alone with Excel for too long.
That's right.
Rob's jealous.
yeah.
Anyway.
All right. I love this story.
I digress.
Yeah, I love this
So you,
study even more now, knowing that there are 322 graphs behind it.
Yeah.
You didn't want. Did you try to put them all through Java? Figure 1. Figure 322.
I mean, like, just for spite, for like having to do all of these, that would have been great, but no one would have read that. So I had to pick some. And that's why I ended up picking a program that took a long time in terms of number of sessions to mastery, and a program that took a short time to master, and kind of compared the different sampling analyses across those two types of programs.
That makes sense.
Yes.
You want to give us some background?
Sure.
you only had 2 days to write this whole article.
Yeah.
You wanted to look at Cummings and Carr.
Yes. So I loved the Cummings and Carr article, and I thought that it was a really important step in looking at differences in detecting mastery with first trial versus continuous recording. But the issue with that article was that because they were collecting these data live, so to speak, or during ongoing skill acquisition, they couldn't truly match the skills that were being taught under each measurement method. So there was the potential for intersession variability. So that was one issue to
Right,
tackle.
because like you pick like 20 tacks and you assign 10 of them here and 10 of them here, but you don't know if they're really equal in difficulty.
Right. There could be stimuli associated with each that are occasioning more behavior in one discrete trial session than another. So anyway, that was a potential confound.
Yeah.
And Najowski et al., they extended the findings from Cummings and Carr because they also looked at continuous recording and first trial sampling, but instead of doing it across different sessions of different skills that were being taught, they looked within the same session. So that's like a little bit closer.
Yeah,
so
I
they
like that.
took, yeah. The issue with this study was that they used different mastery criteria for the different sampling methods. So, yes,
Just
or the different
kidding.
measurement methods, right?
Yeah.
I know. You're like, dude, you're so close. Why did you do that?
Huh.
So with the continuous condition or the continuous recording, their mastery criterion were 3 sessions at 80%. With the first trial condition, they had the 3 sessions at 100%.
Because you can't have 80.
Because you can't have 80.
Yeah.
The mastery
that's kind of
criteria were different.
It makes sense, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then,
And those came out the same year. So I bet they were just working on them at the same time.
And then they saw that and like, duh!
Yeah, right?
don't do my study.
Yeah.
I like had that moment of panic so many times at big conferences
Oh,
where
yeah.
I was like, this presentation is related to my topic, but I don't really want to know if I want to go because what if I do and it's my study and it's awesome? And like, then I would cry.
That happened to us recently. One of
Yeah.
our graduate students
Oh,
went to a talk
no.
and she's like, hey, this is my study. And we're like, yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
It's okay. Keep going.
Just don't worry about that.
No, I know. I recall some of those moments of panic of yours.
Yes, you were there for every day of this, Diana.
I know. I'm so proud of you.
Thanks. Okay, moving on from that lovely moment. So then we had Lerman and colleagues who also did a really lovely study. And I loved that study because they added in first 3 trial sampling.
Oh, I love that.
Yes. And
Me too.
yeah. And I was like, oh, that is great. And they recognized the shortcomings with the different mastery criteria that were used in Cummings and Carr and Najowski et al. And they said, don't worry, guys, we will test both.
I thought you were making a pun. Shortcomings.
And they said, in fact, we are going to set the criteria in the middle at 88% instead of the 100% used by Cummings and Carr and the 88% used by Najowski. However, like we talked about earlier, if you have 88%, it's still functionally, in order to meet that criteria, you have to get 100% of trials correct on first 3 trial sampling.
Right.
If you get 2 out of 3, you get 67%. So science marched on, and we came in. And I came into my little conundrum in March of 2013 or whatever year it was that this was. And so we made the mastery criterion. Is it criterion or criteria? I feel like I've gotten corrected on that in writing.
Criterion is singular.
That's singular. Okay, so
criteria is plural.
But still, that doesn't help me because I've asked this question too.
I appreciate that, Jackie.
So if
I mess this up.
Right, so if the criteria are 2 people in 2 settings at 80% across 3 consecutive sessions,
That's
then
one.
there's multiple aspects of that. So it's criteria. But if the only criterion is 80% independent, then it's a
But if we're
criterion.
80% across 2 consecutive sessions, that would be criteria.
Yeah.
Whoa. Hold the phone. We are so smart here.
The
Except
grammar
mind
girl told me
blown.
I don't need to know the difference between
Shut up, grammar girl.
Uh-oh, there's a fight between AB Inside Track Diana and Grammar Girl.
You gotta punch up when you're picking a fight with the pod, other than the podcast. So you wanna.
Anyway, sorry, Mary-Kate.
Sorry, Mary-Kate.
No, I love this.
We got a lot of
There's
beef
just so
on this
many.
show.
There's like a lot of sound effects too, which happen on this show, and not ones that Rob has programmed in.
That is true.
Human sound effects, which I'm appreciating.
We do all our own Foley work. It's quite impressive.
I practice in front of the mirror. I'm like, wow, why they wow.
It's a lazy. What is
Really-
that sound of?
Who knows?
Who knows? It's choose your own adventure sound effect.
What were we talking about?
You're talking about
Okay.
criteria.
Criterion versus
Oh.
criteria.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So we picked criteria at 2 consecutive sessions at 100%. And just to back up and to make one point really clear is we used archival data.
Yes.
But why?
Why? Why do we use
Gosh, you had 5
archival
months.
data?
I know, but I know you had 5 months, but I'm pretty sure, and I know your advisor, that he doesn't skimp on things. So
No.
there's always a rationale.
Yes. What was great about this is that regardless of any of the different prompting procedures used or variability across the skills that were being taught or any of those other factors that often vary even therapist to therapist with the same student in a discrete trial session, the analysis that we did and the way that we did our analyses would have produced the same outcomes.
Cool.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It kind of took all of that into account and didn't end up being a confound for us. There's just a lot of variability with discrete trial teaching. There's a lot of different things. There's technically like 6 different steps, as Jackie kind of outlined in the beginning, of our 6 different therapist behaviors that occur within that discrete trial session, even within a trial. So there's a lot of potential for therapist variability to happen.
Absolutely.
But that's a little bit beside the point. Sorry.
No.
It's actually a good point that we should make. So, way to go, you.
Thanks, Jackie.
I'm just here to support you.
A little side note, I actually collected a lot of these data not knowing they would have been used in this study.
So,
Oh,
it's
yeah?
your scrapbook. It is your scrapbook.
It is like these data were collected from guys that I was teaching that year. And then at the end of the year in March when we needed the study and we were like, we need 24 data sets. I was like, I happen to know of 24 great data sets that we can use.
Wow, that's good. That's interesting, though. That's something that we wouldn't have known.
Yes.
If we weren't less talking to you right now.
Well, there you go. There's a little fun fact. You know, another fun fact about this article is that there are 2 typos.
Oh, no.
I love to find typos.
Me too.
Love it. Whether it's in articles or just in anything that's published, I love finding typos. And there are 2 in here. So that can be the challenge to the listeners. Go find the 2 typos.
Did you make those typos?
Oh, I probably did. I'm sure I did. I'm sure that was my fault.
It might not have been.
No, it might not have been.
I don't remember. I really don't remember.
You should probably just pass that book on.
You shouldn't look.
Yeah.
Go back. Don't go back and look tonight.
I probably won't. I'm going to be honest with you.
That's awesome. I also love to find typos, and I love to correct them.
I like to make typos, so Diana and I are a perfect pair.
Well, I think I should qualify that it's not a typo as in a word was spelled incorrectly, but misinformation was given twice in a very tiny, tiny way.
Okay. Oh gosh, now I really want to know. I'm gonna have to go through and
we'll talk about it on a different errata episode.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Nice. It's like a little scavenger hunt.
Yeah, I know. There's just 2 that I know of.
Okay. Right. People are gonna come back with like 10. So the criteria was just it needed to be a complete start to finish data set.
Yes.
You had every piece of data needed to do the analysis.
Yes, exactly.
And they actually learned the skill.
Yes.
So you just went back and thought about examples? You're like, I know he learned sorting. I know he
Yeah. No, it was exactly like that. I had a group of guys, like I said, that I was teaching, and we had worked on a number of different skills that year, particularly with receptive skills. So and if you look on the table in the article, it talks a lot about them.
Yeah.
But there were identifying different objects in a 3-stimulus array, identifying attributes. There were a lot of matching programs that we were doing, a lot of imitation programs that we were doing. And then there were one, I think, expressive program or tacting program, which was naming objects, but that was with an AAC. So yeah, it was a bunch of different skills that were taught.
All right. And what happened next?
We did quite a few different analyses. Hopefully readers didn't get, too lost in all of the math that was done. But we looked at trial sampling and session sampling. So for trial sampling, we compared continuous recording, and then first 5 trials only. So we called that 5 trial sampling. And then we did 3 trial sampling and then first trial only. And then for the session sampling analysis, we looked at continuous recording across all sessions, looked at every other session of data, every 3rd session of data, and every 5th session of data.
So that's kind of like the Bijou article.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. You put them all together.
It is. And the session sampling, I think, probably happens a lot. So perhaps you have a teacher who is able to conduct multiple sessions of a skill within one day, but perhaps they're only collecting data the first time that they run that program.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's pretty common, which is why we were interested in it as well. I mean, I don't have data to show that is or is not common, but just in my experience, it seems pretty common.
I think with incidental teaching skills, often you say, we'll just record the first 5.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You only have 5 spots on your data sheet, so
fill those
just
up.
Fill those up and then keep doing it, but don't take any more data for the rest of the day.
Even response chaining. People often will conduct a response chain, multiple times, but only collect data the last time that they do it.
That's common too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we looked at the percentage of trials with correct prompted responses and the percentage of trials with correct independent responses as well. And then we looked at the number of sessions and days until that mastery criterion was met. And that was for both of our sampling methods. We did this little funny thing also where we estimated the number of sessions to mastery or the number of days to mastery. And that was because with session sampling, very often in our analyses, mastery was never detected, or we never found 2 consecutive sessions at 100% correct and independent.
Oh, right. Mm-hmm.
And so we still wanted to know, well, how much longer would it have taken for this participant to have mastered that skill, or for mastery to have been detected given the sampling method that was being used?
Right. So I'm going to make a clarification here just because in my head I had to make the clarification to myself. All of the skills had actually been mastered, but given the data sampling that you were using, it didn't demonstrate that.
Exactly.
Yeah. You love that? I was like, in my head, I was like, but wait. And I was like, nope, stupid. But I'm going to clarify it because if I thought it, maybe someone else in the world will have thought it too.
What's kind of confusing too, and it's easier to just explain it than it is, like vocally explain it, than it is to write exactly how that all unfolded.
Oh man, yeah.
Good for you for even trying.
Thank you. That one of my favorite things that we did, which was different from some of the other articles, was convert the data to a proportion.
Mm-hmm.
So we looked at, for every type of trial and session sampling, we looked at the proportion of discontinuous to continuous measures. We were trying to see, for the same data set, would the discontinuous measure, or how much longer or how sooner would a skill considered to be mastered using a discontinuous versus a continuous.
I like that. I like that pull from other literature because that's typically not found in like the data collection sampling, like looking at literature.
Unless Jason Bourret's your advisor.
Right. But
That's very true.
Yeah, but he probably looked at other literature like the behavioral momentum literature in Evan and Grace 2002 and said that's how they look at continuous versus intermittent reinforcement, and was like, oh, I'm going to extrapolate what I learned here to there, which I love when people do.
Yeah, that's been like that was such a huge learning point for me.
Yeah.
I never think like that.
Me neither.
Like, I would never think, what's the proportional measure for these two measurement values? Like, my brain is not going to go there. My homunculus is not going to steer me in that direction. But Jason's did, which was awesome because I got to learn all about making those calculations and making those graphs, and it was cool. And I think that those data are probably some of the more powerful data of the study.
So what do they tell you?
Those data showed us that for all trial sampling, so whether you're doing first trial, first 3, or first 5 trial sampling, or you're systematically going to find underestimation of mastery in comparison to continuous measurement methods. Mm-hmm. So that means that the fewer trials that you collect data on, the more likely you are to say that mastery has occurred before it actually has,
which is
using continuous measures.
Yeah, that's interesting too, and it's also along the lines of the previous research, like the history research, like mastery's occurring faster, right? Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
With the Cummings and Carr and the Lerman paper.
And then conversely, with session sampling, we reliably found systematic overestimation of sessions to mastery using the different sampling methods. So, and the greatest underestimation for trial sampling happened with first trial sampling.
Right.
I'm saying sampling like 1,000 times here. And then the greatest overestimation for session sampling happened with the every 5th session data or measurement method.
And in your estimation, because you've done this, would you rather overestimate or underestimate if you can't get it right?
Yeah, no, I thought about that a lot. I would rather overestimate.
Mm.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I think a lot about the families that I meet with and how I have to look parents in the eye and say, your son is making progress or your son is not making progress on a specific goal, whatever that may be. So it's kind of more of a general takeaway point here, I guess. Mm-hmm. But I would not feel comfortable doing that unless I really had the data to show that for sure. And I would rather overestimate that and be conservative and be on the safe side than underestimate it.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. I bet parents appreciate that too.
I hope so.
I bet behavior's more durable in that situation as well.
Yes. I mean, it has its cons because then you're spending time conducting trials or conducting sessions that, the skills already mastered and you could have been moving on to something else.
Mm-hmm.
But
So every 5th session overestimates because there is some variation in responding such that you're not going to get 100% on every session every time, and you're not capturing the 200% or 89% in a row because you're missing days of data, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly. We had to do the most, remember those like estimation calculations that I told you about?
Yeah.
We had to do the most estimation calculations for our 5th session sampling data than any other data set.
Makes sense.
Which makes sense. It makes sense, yes.
That makes sense.
So you know your underestimation, you know what's going to overestimate. What about the time saving? Because I know that was one of the other big calculations you had to look into.
Yes. So the time saving was surprising to me, actually. I was, to be honest, expecting there to be more estimated time saved per sampling method than what was actually found. I mean, I think it's worth noting that the way that we did this was we went and observed a skilled teacher recording data live across 10 different sessions. Mm-hmm. So, and it was with some of the same students for which these 24 archival data sets were pulled from, but it was not obvious. The data sets were archival. Like, obviously, we didn't have videos of those sessions.
Right.
So
it'd be amazing if you did that. You're like, and I have my scrapbook of data, and I have these video samples, my video scrapbook. People might think you're a little silly then.
Just a little crazy.
Yeah.
Right. So this was a very skilled RBT recording data live that we observed. And then we had that same RBT enter data into an Excel spreadsheet, and we just recorded the time.
I love that
it took her to do that.
And then at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. It was like really not that complicated.
I'm glad you thought of that, though, because to be honest, if I was using archival data, I'd be like, how am I going to answer this question? And that would take me a while to think that, I can just go look at somebody else doing it.
Yeah. Use them as a sample.
Right, yeah.
Right. This was a recommendation made specifically by Dr. Hanley and Dr. Thompson in the defense, in the master's thesis defense.
Okay.
When I defended, I had just done the sampling analyses, and then they said, hey, you know what would be cool is a time savings analysis. And I said, that's a great idea. And so
what you really said was, I have to do more.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I really said. I was like, are you kidding me? I'm not done yet.
But then you thought it was a good idea in hindsight.
I think it is a good idea because even so say that we just presented those sampling data and we made that strong recommendation at the end that we did, which was, hey, do continuous. Like, when you can, do continuous. People are still going to be like, it takes me so long. I don't want to do continuous.
That's what they sound like
people?
Too, right?
I got to write all these pluses and minuses, and I got to type them into it's so hard. Ugh.
Like, this is the worst. They don't know what they're talking about.
Ugh.
And so it's almost like a social validity thing. To show, and you have the data, so, but you're showing, like, you know what, guys, like, it really doesn't even save you that much time.
Right.
And the example that we carried through in the discussion of that analysis was a skill that took a participant an exorbitantly long time to master. It took him 89 sessions to master, which was 29 weeks.
That's a bit of time.
It's a long time.
Like, it's a long time.
Yeah.
It's not like one of
7
our
months.
Yeah. It's not like one of our young spring chickens that can master it in like 2 weeks.
We did so much math right there. We're like, this week's convert to months, convert to hours. That was pretty good, guys. It's like,
I'm impressed.
Math.
I'm not really a math person.
Me
I don't know
neither.
how I get roped into these studies with a lot of math.
Surprise people who don't know you and have only read your work.
Because it's all about math.
Yeah.
I know. And I really am not. I got a 2 on the AP calculus exam in high school. Like, I really am not good at math.
That's also a fun fact, really.
Yeah, no, and like at one point I was a creative writing major. So it's very strange that I ended up in this little segment of the behavior analytic research world.
But you're smart. You can do it.
Anyone can do math
Thanks,
if they really
Diana.
try.
You know, it's just logic, really. it's just logical.
What do you think, like, your biggest finding was?
I would say that I think it's probably the time savings analysis, in that really, truly not a significant amount of time was saved to justify using a sampling method.
Mary-Kate, can I ask why you feel that it was not significant? Because, I mean, certainly you wrote the times out, and reading them, they don't seem like that big a savings. But are there any sort of further analysis or extrapolation that you put into to really feel like these do not count as significant time savings? Or was it more just a general sense of, given the amount of time that was saved, given the fact that there was overestimation and underestimation, just as a package, your sense as a clinician was it was not significant?
Definitely more the second scenario that you laid out. Like, for example, with this little guy that took, it took 89 sessions to master in 29 weeks. If you used first trial sampling, you're only saving about an hour and a half of time across that 29 weeks, across all of those months.
Right.
So
if I look at your graph here, it's the combined time savings for data recording and data entering for that 89 trials is for using first trial data, 89 minutes. Am I reading that right?
Yeah.
And first 5 trials is about 45 minutes.
Yes.
That's not a lot.
Compared to
across the period of time.
So
I
an hour
think
and a half.
that's the key point, is just how long it took overall to reach mastery at any point. The hour and a half really sounds worthless. Maybe we could have 26.5 weeks.
89 sessions and about 90 minutes of savings. That's a minute per session.
And if you take it, you're totally right. And again, coming from the parent's perspective of, like, spend another hour and a half with my child so that they can really master this. Mm-hmm. Like, what is another hour and a half given the 30 hours that he's already there learning these skills? Yeah, that's kind of why I landed at that place.
I feel like that's a little bit sad for our listeners, because I think everyone wants to use discontinuous measurement. I feel like it's like the idea is that it's just going to be so quicker and easier and less effort for everyone. But across these different articles, we're all sort of coming to the same conclusion.
And it may not be better.
The through line of almost every research story, I think, is there's never any super fast way to do it, and it's idiosyncratic. Yeah. Those are the pieces that I think we always come up to. There's never any sort of magic, and just do it this way, and you'll save so much time, and everyone's exactly the same, and you can just teach one way. There's always a lot of that. The savings just aren't there, or if they are there, you're really balancing a lot of pros and cons. And I think you, in the article, Mary-Kate, you recommended, if you have to do the discontinuous sampling, I guess you could try to get away with I can't remember if it was the 5 trial. It was 5 trial, right?
Right. If you're going to do trial sampling, do 5 trial. And if you're going to do session sampling, do every other.
And did you think of sort of a scenario in which I guess it makes sense for you to use those sampling methods rather than the continuous? It was sort of like a made up scenario of, I guess I would do it if this were the case, or
well, I think I kind of with what Carbone recommends is, when teaching language and using that verbal behavior approach, perhaps just taking data on the first 5 mans programmed for the session would be fine. But if you're teaching a skill using match to sample, then if you don't have all of those data, you're really not understanding the behavior when X, Y, or Z stimulus is being presented. Mm-hmm. So you're just losing so much information. I guess the same argument could be made for man training too, but I don't know, clinically and just through experience, I think it probably makes more sense to do sampling with language acquisition. Mm-hmm. I don't have any data to support that though.
But Carbone does, and he suggests it.
Yeah, that's true. We should listen to him.
Match to sample, there's 3 stimuli. So even if you did the first 3 trials, you're really just getting 1 data point for each stimulus.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you. That was so much more concisely my point. Thank you. That's exactly what I meant.
Oh, sure.
Yes.
Cool. I feel like we've sort of ended up sliding into dissemination station on accident.
Yeah, we totally have. We kind of
skidded our way in there.
All right. Well, let's do it. So Mary-Kate. All right. I'm going to give you a scenario. All right. All these new BCBAs, they just passed their test. They're just starting out in their first brand new job as a BCBA, and they're told, "Hey, we need you. No one wants to take data. It's too much of a pain. It wastes too much time. You got to get all these programs done a lot faster." And they're thinking, you know what? Maybe discontinuous methodology. That's the way I'm going to go. What would be your suggestions to them and your warnings? Just kind of the elevator pitch about it. What would you say?
My suggestions and my warnings would be like, okay, well, if you decide to only collect data on a subset of trials, then you're most likely going to determine that mastery of that skill has occurred before it actually has. So those methods are going to underestimate the number of sessions to mastery. And if you decide to do session sampling, then you're going to spend more time in teaching because that sampling method is going to overestimate the number of sessions to mastery.
But I hate graphing. I don't want to do it. It takes so much time.
Suck it up, Rob. Find a different job.
Yeah, I would say this is the crux of your decision making. Mm-hmm. So,
and I
probably should get some good data.
I was playing a part there. I actually really love graphing. Just
we all do. We're all real big nerds.
It's
I think
true.
The difference here when we talk about discontinuous measurement for trial acquisition or skill acquisition versus using it for momentary time sampling is when you're trying to do momentary time sampling, for example, you're also trying to do a lot of other things. Mm-hmm. And when you're teaching a skill, like that should be your main focus is teaching that skill. And you're not fast forwarding through all of the other trials. You're still running all those trials and the behavior still occurs. It's just whether you record the data or not. And I think we here at least agree that if you are a fairly skilled behavior technician, you should be able to jot those data down pretty quickly, and maybe you deliver the reinforcer first and then you jot it down while they're engaging with the reinforcer. It shouldn't take that much extra time really, and then you don't run into all these questions about whether you've overestimated or jumped the gun on whether something's mastered or waited too long to move on to some new stimuli, and you're playing around with this child's time, and that's really important. And I think that just take the data, I guess.
Yeah. And like what you said, Diana, I think it's like about the delivery of reinforcer and recording of the data and when those two events happen. It is one of my hugest things that I work on with new RBTs with discrete trial training is deliver the reinforcer first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then record the data.
But I love that look on their eyes or those new RBTs like, oh, I got to do the data. And they get all nervous because they were looking at them and you're going to yell at them about data. When you're like, no, data's nice, but, the reinforcement is the key component here.
It's actually very important. Right. So deliver that, like right now, and then record your data.
I guess in the moment, though, if you're being observed and you're an RBT, where your reinforcer's coming from, it's probably from the person staring at you, and you assume they're going to yell at you more about the data because you're not giving them a candy or anything.
It's true.
I wish they were, though. Nice job watching me. Here's a high five.
All right, good. So I think that we're all in agreement, and hopefully this wasn't too big of a letdown. For our listeners,
I feel
out there.
bad. I know. I feel like I might have crushed some dreams.
I'm going to make sure that in all the little preview text, it's going to be like, oh, maybe you can save hours and hours. I don't know. It's discontinuous. It's the way to go, I think. You should listen to the whole episode.
To find out. It's
the
okay.
last 5 minutes will be surprising, or whatever that clickbait thing is.
I
The
love
last
that.
picture
And
will
It
surprise
always
you.
works. I'm like, what is the last picture?
It's never that exciting.
No,
never.
it isn't. Mm-mm.
This one
Like
actually
an
is
ad
kind of
for like
exciting.
brawny paper towels.
Well, Mary-Kate, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about discontinuous measurement and your research on it. It's always nice to get kind of that background information as to how an article gets made, especially one, I think, which looked at archival data, which we don't see a lot, and we don't read a lot of those. And it's cool to realize that is something you can do.
Absolutely. No, I've loved this. I love talking about this kind of stuff. So thank you guys for having me on.
Absolutely.
It's our pleasure.
It
Now,
was super fun.
before we let you go, though, we're going to make you listen to our second secret code word, even though it's irrelevant for you. But it's relevant for anyone listening who'd like to order some CEs. And the second secret code word is suit, S-U-I-T, like a tuxedo suit, or a gray suit, or a business suit, or a birthday suit. Suit. And that brings us to the end of the show. What? Dinah's giving me a face on that one. I thought that was
I don't know. It's great.
apropos code word. So that brings us to the end of the show. So I want to make a big thank you to our special guest, Mary-Kate Carey, almost doctor / doctor.
Doctor, guys. Dr. Carey.
Dr. Carey, for her research and for taking the time on this busy evening to record with us. Thank you so much, Mary-Kate. We really appreciate it.
Of course.
I also want to say thank you to all of you listening out there. We really hope you enjoyed the show. Why not let us know how you felt by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you listen to this show. You could subscribe to the show. You could even give us feedback on Facebook or Twitter, or you can go to the website, abainsidetrack.com, or email us at abainsidetrack@gmail.com.
Thanks,
All
Mary
right.
Don't
Kate.
forget to thank Kyle Sturry for
Oh,
our
yes.
music interstitial.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Kyle.
What's that show we've been listening? Oh, the Myths and Legends podcast. This guy just tells like old stories, but there's some guy who wrote his theme song, and he always thanks him. And every time he thanks him, I think, oh, I got to remember to thank Kyle Sturry on our next recording episode. And Kyle, I always forget. I'm sorry.
But it's still awesome, Kyle.
I still use it. It's still Kyle. All right, everyone. Thanks again so much for listening. We'll be back next week with our preview episode. But until then, keep responding. Bye.
Bye.